So we have Dr. Rochel Lieberman here to talk about seeing the whole story, partnering with parents to support socially sensitive children. I'm so excited about this topic. Thank you for joining us today.
My joy, my pleasure and my joy.
So this is available for Asha CEUs. It is free on wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. But if you are interested in earning AFA CEUs, you can do that through Tassel. So we need to provide learning outcomes and an agenda, which I will do now. By the end of this pod course, we hope that you'll be able to define the whole story framework, including its origins, underlying research, and the needs it was designed to address in families. Identify two core components of story, emotion, social therapy, and explain how storytelling supports regulation and connection. Describe how whole story functions as an interdisciplinary approach between speech language therapy and mental health practice. And identify two practical strategies parents can use to implement whole story during everyday moments with socially sensitive children. Here is our agenda for today. We are starting with introductions and background, and then we'll talk about what it means to be a socially sensitive child and how we navigate that as speech language pathologists. We'll talk about the origins of whole story. Then we'll talk about storytelling as regulation and connection. We'll finalize with whole story in interdisciplinary practice and wrap up with references and closing remarks. Dr. Lieberman, thank you again for coming on. Can you share your background information with us?
Sure. So I'm going to begin. You can see this on the slide as well. I'm the founder and owner of WholeStory Speech, and that's a private practice in Brooklyn, New York. It serves children with social emotional challenges. And what's unique is that we co-treat in separate one-on-one sessions parents of the children who attend. I am licensed in New York and California. I'm the creator of the approach of Whole Story, and it's based on the story, emotion, social therapy, which is called SEST. It uses storytelling to support mindful language and social communication, and does not forget about the parents and the caregivers who support these children on the sidelines. So it really equips parents with specific tools that they need to navigate the everyday social challenges that most children face. In 2025, I was awarded, which is just this past year, the Distinguished Clinician Award from a New York State Speech Language Hearing Association due to the innovation of Whole Story and Story Emotion Social Therapy. My research is published on topics of emotions and narratives and social communication. I'm the author of a therapist and educator guide called SEST Fundamentals. It includes a curriculum. I wrote parent social education books called Whole Second Micro Books. And I'm the author of a children's book and a parent discussion guide. The book is on perfectionism and anxiety. It's called Perla and Her Unpredictably Perfect Day. I know that's kind of a mouthful, and I like to really summarize my bio. And whenever I can, I summarize my bio and say, I help parents become the person their child talks to about blank. And the blank is that the child should really be able to talk to their parent about anything, things that make them happy, sad, things they just want to share. And when the parent becomes the person who their child can talk to about anything, it helps them navigate many social situations as well as harness a connected relationship with them.
I love that. And I'm just a little bit curious because I have an undergraduate degree in psychology, and it sounds like you've interwoven some psychology into here. Do you have any association with that field as well?
Sure. So I'll go into that a little bit further, but story emotion social therapy is actually an interdisciplinary framework. So it connects the fields of mental health and speech pathology. And I'm going to walk you through that. I hope to walk you through that in this interview.
I can't wait. Well, if you are here for Dr. Lieberman, my name is Vanita Litvack. I go by she, her. I've been a licensed SLP since 2014, and I'm the host of this podcast, which is part of the Tassel Learning Network that provides CEUs. I am the CE content consultant for Tassel. I have a small private practice specializing in early intervention, AAC, and autism. And I am currently an SLPD student at Northwestern University, focusing on teaching and learning. I have ownership interest in Speechie Side Up LLC and Tassel Learning LLC. How about you, Rochel?
So my financial relationships is I am the owner of WholeStory Speech. I receive royalties from SEST Fundamentals, which is the curriculum, and I'm receiving an honorarium for speaking in this Podcourse. The non-financial relationships is the collaborator from the mental health components for Story Emotion Social Therapy was Gary Dick, LISW. The presentation will include information about SEST fundamentals for teaching children with social emotional skills and communication, and other treatments will receive limited or no coverage during this interview.
Thank you for sharing this. You can tell you've done quite a few interviews or presentations before. You're ready
Yeah.
with the info. I love it. So this term is new to me. I think I have a socially sensitive child, 5-year-old girl. We've always said she's highly sensitive. And we got that term from Dr. Becky, who maybe you've seen online. I think she's in your area too. She's in New York, but I want to hear what socially sensitive children are and who it includes, and what do you wish every parent understood about them?
Okay, sure. So I want to begin first with the belief that grounds my work. So I believe that as a parent, as a therapist, if telling children what to do would work, then they would already be doing it. So as a speech pathologist who works in social communication, I see many children who are described with the words struggling socially. And what I've learned over time is that most of these children don't need more reminders. They don't need more rules. What they need is to be understood within their lived experience. So I want to be clear, it's not a rejection of skills-based teaching or explicit instruction, modeling, practice. That's often very necessary and very helpful. And behavioral approaches can be very helpful and necessary. But from a strength-based, inclusion-focused approach, skills are the most effective when they are built on an understanding, not on a compliance. So let me explain. Too often we teach children how to act socially before we even ask them how the social world feels for them. So sometimes we ask a child to do something, they nod, they'll repeat the expected response. They might even show the skill in a structured setting, but in real life, that behavior doesn't transfer. Say hi to grandpa. That's an example I always like to give. Say hi, then say hi. And the failure is not really because of their effort or their motivation. And there's like this mismatch between what we're like kind of expecting and between their experience. And social behavior is not a checklist, but it's really a lived experience. And it's really shaped by the perception of the person. So Benita, you and I are both sitting over here. I can have one perception of this interview. You can have a different perception. Our experience is shaped by our culture, our sensory processing, our emotional regulation, our identity, maybe some power dynamics. Here, you're interviewing me. I'm the one who's answering, right? Our relationship, there's so much that's shaped by it. It's our safety. And going back to the children, it's when we take the time to listen to them, and we could listen to what they believe was happening, what they wanted or needed, what emotions were present, then suddenly their social behavior now makes sense to us, right? So, and when we start understanding their social behavior, it becomes something that we don't need to fix first. Even second, the first thing is we need to understand. So the WholeStory approach is grounded on making more meaning rather than on correcting the behavior. So let's say instead of saying, I'm going to start with what the child should do, I actually want to understand what the child is already doing. Okay, what social behaviors they're already doing, and also why it makes sense to them. So with the WholeStory approach, we get the child to organize the thoughts in their head. The social world feels very overwhelming, but I'd love to hear, What did you notice? What did you feel? What did you want? What was your goal? What happened next? And children learn a storytelling framework, yet their parents, they're at the center of this work. So I'm kind of bringing you into your question of who are these children? Who are these socially sensitive children? So and that's a history that I had to kind of, walk you through, because when I began working with children who are often described as like neurodivergent, right? Children who have autism, ASD level 1, children with ADHD, social communication differences, many of these children, they do need language scaffolding to help them, accept, really to get access to their social learning. And that remains valid. And some children do need direct, structured kind of scaffolds and support. But then I was working with children across neurotypes. The social world is overwhelming for many children. And the classical issue, a lot of times a parent or a therapist will say, listen, here's this child. They don't fit a diagnosis, but they're presenting with X, Y, and Z. So like my air quotes is children who are considered neurotypical, they still can have social anxiety, sensory overload, emotional intensity, difficulty navigating unspoken rules, right? And children who are just responding, look, they're so overwhelmed from the social world. So whereas I was cognizant to try to give those supports to the children with ASD level 1 and SCD, when I was working with a child who found the social world overwhelming, I said to myself, we have to go away from the differences of who these children are. We all have a shared humanity. We're all like all those children, all of us socially sensitive. And I want to also say what we mean when we talk about social skills. We're not talking about politeness and obedience. We're talking about access. That's the way I see it. Access to relationships, to participation, to belonging. Now, so for example, skills like joining a group, waiting, sharing, asking for help, they give us access. So I work with children who are navigating complex social worlds, and they're in bodies and brains that deserve respect. And so when I say, who do I mean by socially sensitive? I want to say, as the saying goes, is that labels are for cans, right? As the saying goes, labels are for cans, not for people. So they're really for children, all children who find the social world overwhelming, not to put a label on a can. Because all children, when they're understood, they feel safer. When they feel safer, then they could reflect and say how they see the world. And then we get that meaning before we start understanding their behavior. So you asked me what you wish parents knew. I do wish parents knew that before fixing a behavior, we have to learn to understand. And most parents really, over time, like you say, there's different things that you listen to and learn. But parents have so much power. And I think really that's what I wish parents knew, that they have so much power. So for children, for adults, for all humans to survive and thrive, we need to have an ability to say what's on our minds, right? And as parents, we also need to be able to say. And, as Dan Siegel, and he works with Tina Bryson, they have 4 needs for healthy development, right? Children need to be safe, seen, soothed, and secure, the 4 S's. Now, when those 4 S's are met, it improves behavior, it improves learning. What I wish parents knew is that parents want to give children the 4 S's. And what happens often that I see is that children don't really tell parents what's wrong. They're not going to come home and really say exactly what's the wrong thing. And parents really feel like intuitively, like something is wrong. They don't have the full picture. But sometimes from the parents who I work with, or parents who come into my practice, a lot of times parents are coming with a history of being told, don't say this, it's going to mess up the child. Say this, don't say that. They're under this like crazy pressure. Say this, don't say this. And over time, it like chips away at their instincts. And parents worry, did I say the right thing? Did I do the wrong thing? And there's also like fear. And besides to this fear, like exhaustion, right? It's a lot of work. There's cultural expectations, past experiences. There's a lot of noise of advice. And then the first thing the parent's going to do is correct before connecting because, I just not quiet, but that quiet when the child goes quiet, it's not like a calm, it's a disconnection. And really, it's this cycle that I'm noticing so much is where the truth really is that children feel safest when they open up to an adult who trusts themselves. It doesn't mean that we have everything right all the time. It doesn't mean that we're not insecure. It doesn't mean we don't have worries, but we trust ourselves enough so communication flows. And if we don't have that back and forth conversation, parents, caregivers, it's natural. Okay, we're just going to give instructions to the child, fixing power struggles, and we're not really getting to the root of what's going on. So really, whole story helps parents rebuild that trust, not through like a script or through blaming, literally just connecting to the child, learning how to navigate and connect with the child, understanding the story elements that the child's trying to share about the social world. And that's really something I wish parents know. They have a lot of power, and that's how we got there. We got to this kind of cycle and taking that power back.
That is so interesting and so accurate. I love what you said about labels are for cans, not
Yes.
people. It's so true.
That's a famous saying. I don't, I tried to look before it was attributed to so many people. But yeah, labels are for cans. They're not for people.
Yeah, it's hard to put somebody in a box,
Yeah.
right? And like you said, any child can experience these social anxieties, whether they have a diagnosis or they don't have a diagnosis. So I'm really excited to learn how Whole Story and your other approaches can help with that. You said Dan Siegel. I've read his book, but I don't remember the four S's. I got safe, secure, soothed. What was the last one?
Seen,
Seen.
safe,
Thank you.
safe, seen, soothed, and secure.
Amazing. Awesome. Oh, one other thing I wanted to ask, and you might talk about this as we move on, is what age do you find that children respond best to this type of therapy?
Oh, very good. So from 7 and up, because they need to have
Okay,
working language.
that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. You ready to move to the next question? Or is there
Yes,
anything else
yes,
you want to
yes, yes.
add here?
Well, you know
Okay,
what? As we talk, we can always add things and yeah.
perfect. So, how did it all begin, and what need did you see in families? And how do you personally partner with parents in your overall approach?
Okay. So I'm going to start with, I think I kind of addressed what kind of need I wanted, but really there was two needs and that I kept on noticing as a speech pathologist working in different settings in school and private practice, teaching at the college level, my own children, so many children who I worked with, I really saw how a lot of times we were telling them what to do. Okay. We were asking them to do things, but we were missing the child's perspective. And if I can walk out of a party and a child can walk out of a party and know that I have experienced the party in one way and the child experienced the party in another way, until we have that shared communication, I cannot explore the child's mindset. I can't even help them problem solve something because I don't even know how they experienced the situation. So I was looking for an approach where the child would get shared communication. There would be like this, like connecting of the dots through essential story elements where the child would be able to say how they viewed a social situation. I like to give an example where, let's say, for example, a child receives a gift. And, we prompt the child and say, you got the gift from grandma. When she gives it to you, say thank you, okay? And remember, I'm so proud of you and you're going to do it. And we go in and either the child says, like, yeah, why are you saying it like that? Or the child doesn't say thank you or leaves the room. Many times you're like, how could they not say thank you? Like, we're just seeing the behavior, right? But we don't know their story. Maybe the child has a fear of the unknown. Like, they don't like opening up a present. Who knows what's inside of it? Maybe, like last year, grandma bought her something that she just doesn't like. And she's always asking her about it. Like, how am I going to get out of this again? So we need to have something based on a shared way of giving stories where the children and the adults could kind of learn what researchers put in as the essential parts that we need to put in when we give effective stories, the stories of recounts of our day, of our events. And then the parent or the listener of that, they like kind of solve the child's story by listening for the connected dots, listening for the puzzle pieces of what makes up an effective story. And what my intention was that therapists and parents would view these stories as maps. They would show where the child might need some social work, some social skills, because we'd finally get to know what's going on. And that was like my first motivation. I'm a creative person. I'm a researcher. I also, I like to get into story. When I wrote my book, Pearl on an Unpredictably Perfect Day, I wanted to write a story that was a self-help journey that was camouflaged. Like I like things where it's a technique, but the person doesn't feel like, okay, here's a script, here's a blank template. So that was my first motivation. I want children to be able to express what's on their minds and share stories, share about their events, not be afraid to say it. And who's going to listen? So that was like my second motivation. Like, who's going to listen to these stories? Parents, right? And why parents? Well, Dan Goldman, I think his famous line is, family life is our first school of learning. And he has like, what do you learn in this school? How we feel about ourselves, how we think and feel about our choices, how to read and express hopes and fears, right? And who's in our family? Our parents. So I wanted to look for an approach that directly supported parents in this story element, in this story way that we were going to talk. Now, very fascinating is that in all the years, I didn't really feel that parents expressed direct support. Either they called the therapist for a few minutes after the session, or they got some homework, or but there wasn't this like assigned parent ed. In my practice, every child who comes, the parent comes to separate parent ed sessions. We kind of write in goals. Yeah, give parents parent education, but what are we doing with these goals? How is it structured? And when I was putting this together in my mind, the image came to me of like this old joke with the marriage counselor. Okay. So like many parents, I'm going to use this word for dramatic effect. Right? Parents drop their child off by the speech pathologist and say, she's not behaving. He's not behaving. Fix him. I'll be back in 45 minutes. And there's this old joke with a marriage counselor where a spouse drops off, wife drops off the husband drops off the wife, and but the marriage counselor says, this behavior is impossible. I'm coming back in 45 minutes. I want it fixed, right? And the marriage counselor says, sure, we can do that. Just come right in.
Yeah.
What it means is that it doesn't mean that you're bold or to give blame. It just means you have so much power. You're part of the dynamic. So that was the real need that I saw. And how this began was I started writing up the research. And I'll go over the research in just a bit, but over the research was, and I know that one of the objectives are that we should leave with 2 tangible skills. So at this point, I'd love to be able to, talk about 2 essential elements. The title of this talk was called Seeing the Whole Story. As a parent, sometimes we don't see the whole story, and all we want to do is see the whole story. Like, I'd love to know what's going on. I want to know if the child's upset because they didn't like the lunch they took to school, or if they got into a fight with a friend, or who knows what's going on. Like, I want to see the whole story. So when I started working, not all the children wanted to do the homework. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go and tell my mom like the story. Like, how does that work? And for the parent education is the parent has to become the person who gives their child the 4 S's that we just spoke about. You have to create emotionally safe conversations. So I'll give you an example. Maybe people who are listening even could pause and think about this. But imagine one day you meet a friend, and this is after a long day, a day that, was not an easy day. You didn't have life was not that easy that day. And you meet this friend and they're like, how are you? How was your day? And you're like, super great. Have a great day. And then, a few minutes later, you meet a friend And they're like, maybe you didn't even see this friend in like 6 weeks. Like, and you haven't texted, you haven't been in touch. But they go, hey, how are you? And you go, actually, and you start feeling so comfortable and you share a little bit about your day. So they could think for a minute what that second friend provides for you. So,
Mhm.
right. So that second friend kind of gives you that vibe of like, we're safe.
Yeah.
If the
Or makes sense.
Yeah. So if a parent, in order for the parent to become that listener, they have to create emotionally safe conversations. They have to be checked in. First of all, we're constantly distracted with our phones, with the ding and the ping and all the stuff. We have to be checked in. We have to be mindful, become aware of what happens when we check in, ready to connect, not ready to go and fix and to resolve. We have to learn how to listen to comprehend. I teach parents to listen to comprehend, listen to hear the message. So many times we hear it, we make up another story in our head what that meant, and we think we comprehend. We don't. Listen for the feelings. But all this work really has to be very authentic and wholesome. So there's two techniques where the whole story method, which is based on the SEST approach, right? Is that me first, is that before we ask a child to do the work, the adult does it first. We
Mhm.
ask the child to pause, we pause. We ask the child to reflect, we reflect. We ask the child to regulate, we check in and we're calm. We're not going to be perfect, but we're going to be honest. Children, they don't learn self-regulation from instructions, right? Take a deep breath. They learn it from us saying, give me a second. I need something. I need to relax. I need a second before I respond. I like to, again, for dramatic effect, the the parent who's saying, right, script,
Yeah.
right? That's not how you teach to calm down or stop,
Right.
right? That's not how. So me first is first the parent does the activities on themselves. That would be number one. And so much of that is about modeling so the children can have that, unbelievable tool. And the second thing is, and this is really important to me, is that the whole story is based on a formula. You see, now a lot of when I began working, a lot of parents used to come in asking me for scripts. And again, I'm nothing against the script. There's so many good scripts, like, I noticed and I wonder what's, there's so many good I statements. And it makes complete sense, right? Especially if you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you're worried you're going to say the wrong thing. I get it. And it does give you a little bit of the right, it gives you the right words. And scripts are good supports, but the problem is that real life doesn't follow a script. And like there's the tone, there's the timing. So instead, and also kind of feeds into this narrative that like, mom, don't say this, just say that. Again, everything is good in balanced way. So what I like to teach is the whole story formula. Basically, a formula doesn't tell you what to say. It just tells you where to start. So in a hard moment, when you're feeling socially disconnected from your child, like you're not sure what's going on, child's misbehaving, there's a lot going on. The formula is to ask a question. Who needs the support now? If it's me, I'm going to regulate. If it's the parent, I regulate. The adult, the therapist, the caregiver. If it's the child and I'm calm, then I'm going to lend my calm to the child. I'll be able to stay in a calm centered place and respond mindfully to the child. If it's both of us, if a parent and a child are both dysregulated, the parent's going to go first. Like, the airplane with dad, putting the mask on yourself first. Parents don't need to have perfect words. They just need to be aware. And then when they're aware, they could create the emotionally safe environment. So it kind of goes full circle to what we discussed. So like that friend that you meet that you're more authentic with. And then again, it's full circle where the child can then communicate. And in story, emotion, social therapy, which is the theoretical framework that the whole story approach is based on, is that children need to be able to share what's on their mind with their parents. If you recall, I said in my bio, I like to say I help parents be the person who their child talks to about anything. So children are able to express how they see the world with a storytelling framework where they can talk about their thoughts, their feelings about a social situation. what they plan on doing about it through the story parts. They learn a framework of like based on McCone et al., somebody wanted because, and then we work on looking at the more detailed story grammar parts. We look at the because, like nonviolent communications, because we looked at CBT's thoughts and feelings, and basically the child's able to say every part of their story in it. If I can ask you to go over to the slides, I want to just show so before I can go in this deeper. So first of all, this is me first. SEST is based on approach that we do the work before asking the child. And another reason why this is so impactful, I do give a lot of trainings and talks to parent groups, to schools. And when you go me first, if you can look at the next slide, is that I firmly believe that parents don't need more reasons to feel overwhelmed and pressure. They need to
Right.
notice what's already working. Hey, I connect to myself. I realize, you know what? I'm already doing this. There's so much good that we notice once we're checked in. And the next slide is just a review of the formula where it's like, who needs the support now? Is it me? Is it my child? Is it both? Once we have this power, these tools, then we're able to really handle and listen to any story that the child says. So I'd like to get into a little bit more into the meat and potatoes of the storytelling approach. Also, if you could just go back 2 more, sorry. What else did I put up there? Let me see. I put up there. Oh, very good. Okay. So
This one's okay.
yeah. Okay. So we're up to there. Yeah.
Amazing. I really like the idea of I was wondering, like, what do you do when it's both of them who are dysregulated or having a hard time? And you answered my question. So thank you for that. And I like that idea of me first. And also that reminder for parents to connect and listen and not try to fix and resolve. I feel like as parents, we feel like it's our duty to fix and resolve. And, you're validating that that's not what we need to do. We need to like connect with the child, to listen to them and, maybe even support them in coming up with their own solutions too.
Absolutely. And we'll go over that. Absolutely. That is the goal. Absolutely. Yeah. That's really, how it is.
I love that. Is it okay if we move to the next question?
Meh.
Okay, perfect. So, how does storytelling support regulation and connection? And what research informs the whole story and story emotion social therapy approach?
Okay. So I'm going to talk and explain, but I always say knowledge is power. And the more you read and the more you know, the better you feel about, understanding and learning. So there's 2 QR codes. One of them, the top one with the kind of like the clipboard, that can go straight to my research for story, emotion, social therapy. That's the theoretical framework, and the whole story approach is based on that. Yeah, you can take out your phone and go to the top. And on the bottom, the one with like the hand on the platter, that's the curriculum that I'll walk you through. That's the QR code for that. So SEST stands on 2 main pillars. And there's a CBT, which is on the basis, basically, it's looking at sessions from a antecedent like behavior rather than approaching them from like this behavioral, like antecedent behavior, reward, consequence type of treatment. It uses a cognitive behavioral therapy approach, which is a talking therapy that can be used to treat people with a wide range of mental health and social emotional issues. And CBT is based on the idea that how we think, our cognition, how we feel, our emotion, and how we act, our behavior, they all interact with each other. So if let's say my story is that I think a cat is scary and it can bite me, and I feel a pang in my chest and a flush in my face and a sense of dread when I see that cat. So my behavior is to hide behind a tree and to hold my hand in my chest. The other pillar of SEST is story grammar, and that refers to the parts of the story where SLPs assess children's understanding of stories, called macrostructure, right? And there's all different researchers like Stein and Glenn, Peterson et al., and they have different models to gauge children's story knowledge. And story grammar doesn't just include the elements themselves, but the way that they're arranged makes a difference. And SEST, the umbrella is basically trying to get the 2 bridges together the CBT and story grammar through emotional intelligence and mindfulness approaches to connect the two as follows. So, story grammar combination that the whole story approach uses is settings, actions. We start with the somebody, wanted, because, but, thought and felt. So at the end, thought and felt. And it's adapted from Stein and Glenn story grammar and researchers McCone et al. Somebody wanted but so strategy. The wanted in the SEST explains the human needs from Marshall Rosenberg of the nonviolent communication. Whether or not a character met their human need in the story, you'll feel comfortable or uncomfortable. And the reason why CBT and story grammar work so well synergistically, and you can read it in the research that's published, you could see again, once you scan that QR code on top, is that CBT, that relates to the emotional and social situations that an individual talks about. So story grammar's initiating event is the beginning of the story the event that propels a story into action. So just like talking about the beginning of a story, initial therapy sessions are usually the event that actually, the initiating event that brought the person into the therapy. For example, I just told you before about someone who was afraid of a cat. Then comes their thoughts. So CBT, it's called the automatic thoughts and emotions. That's based on the individual's beliefs about their experience. And story grammar has the same thing. Their internal response, which is a part of story grammar, is the story character's thoughts and feelings about the events in the story. And then CBT's behaviors that result from the thoughts and feelings, that is related to story grammar's consequence, how the story ends. So, but what's crucial to understand is that the way that a person will solve, like you spoke about helping children solve problems, it's going to be guided by their beliefs about the problem. And how they believe and think about the problem will actually change the outcome. And with the whole story approach, we're not trying to change the other person's story. That's their story. Let's say a child says a story that says, everyone in class is staring at my new sweater and they think it's weird, so I'm not going to the school dance. Okay. That's their story. Our goal is that they tell us their story. That's it. Once they tell us their story, something very, very fascinating happens. The power of telling a story. So SEST WholeStory is not a behavioral approach. It's not an approach that tells kids to do something because, quote unquote, that's what we do. Instead, it's a guide that children share what's on their mind. But here's the interesting thing, and I keep on telling parents, listen to their story, listen, just listen, don't argue. That's what they're saying. They're saying that sweater is weird. Everyone's going to look and everyone's going to laugh. They shouldn't go. The irony is that allowing children to tell their story is healing and actually can get them to do, quote unquote, what we want them to do. So I'll give you an example for all of us. Let's say I have a long day. Let's say I'm giving this podcast. I mean, this is not true because I'm organized and I already know what I'm making for dinner. I'm giving this podcast and I say, I'm done. I'm like, you know what? Ugh. I'm not cooking dinner for a month. Let's say I say that. The minute that comes out of my mouth, right? My intelligence says, hello, I just mean I want to order takeout tonight. So I think problem solve because I let the story out. Like Maya Angelou says, there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story beside you. So we get the child to say their story. I can tell a whole story. Then in there are those thoughts that were really not so helpful. And then we get the child to see if they can expand their perspective. We prompt them. We ask them to think about their story. And they can sometimes tell another whole story. And maybe their other whole story is, my sweater, okay, not the coolest thing ever, but no one notices. I could wear it anyway. But maybe, I think there's an option to choose the whole story that's most me today, because sometimes we feel great today and then tomorrow we're not interested and today is this. But with the whole story approach is we don't measure success by if they chose the quote unquote desired story. Like I'll explain. Let's say, for example, I know, like even last night I went out with my children and there's like this bowl of like cabbage slaw. And I'm like, oh God, don't eat it. It's going to hurt my stomach. I'm hearing myself saying it. But it looks so good. And I love the vinegary taste. And then the next thing I know, I put some on my plate. Okay. We all eat cabbage slaw that we know will hurt our stomach, right? We all do things that we shouldn't do, right? So it's
Uh-huh.
very normal for a child to say, yeah, but I'm still not going to that party. And okay, maybe I'll go for 2 minutes, but we don't have to get them to change. Like, for example, in other words, I want to explain. So let's say I work with some children who have very rigid thinking. Let's say if their friend has different music, they are not even a person. Like, how could you like different music than me? Okay. Or like we're doing a group project and this person wanted to use Canva and this person wanted to go, make like a crafty thing. How could you use Canva? She's cheating. Really? And they're stuck on that. So sometimes the child will tell the whole story, what they think about this, and then they could choose another whole story. But sometimes they're still going to eat that cabbage slaw and they're going to be like, I'm just not doing the project with her. And let them sit with it. Let them sit with it. And creating that space to not solve, but to work through the story parts, so you're not going to do the project with her. Interesting. So what do you want? Because, well, how do you think it's going to end? What are you going to think about it after you don't get a great mark because you didn't do it together? Interesting. Okay. So we allow the child to regulate and to tell their story on their own. And then what happens is that the children naturally, whether reluctantly or facing reality, be like, you know what? I don't really want to, but it's probably the better choice. I'll just choose to be friends with someone who likes different music. I don't really want to do the project through Canva, but the truth is it's much more effective when we can all collaborate on it. Okay, I'm just going to do it. It doesn't work like magic, but it opens up a channel. Like if I came over to you and said, I don't really care anything you have to say, but please make me, pasta for dinner, right? I'm not really so happy to do that. But if I came over and shared with you, listen, been having a lot of heavy meals lately. I'd love to have like a pasta, a quick thing. I'm more inclined to listen. Now, remember, the aim is with the whole story is we listen to the child whole story. I'd probably say that line over to parents the whole day, because I want it to create a channel where the child can basically learn how to express themselves. This is not like say hi, say goodbye. I notice you didn't say goodbye. What's going on? So there's another story, like just thinking of, let's say a client will tell me, I'm not really going to go out with my friends for pizza because I could tell they didn't really want me to come. And they go through the story. I wanted to go, but they decided last minute. And I think that if they decide last minute, they don't really want me to come. But then in their story, they start saying, yeah, I noticed that they invited everyone last minute. So maybe it's not so personal. And when they sit in their whole story, what happens is they expand their metacognitive thinking. So allowing children to say their whole story is healing, and creating this telling environment actually sounds easy, but it's really not. It's not a behavioral approach. Children don't come in and say, hi, I want to tell you my whole story. They don't want that. They don't do that. So I recognized once my practice started getting very full and I started training some other speech therapists, I realized I needed to create an approach a tool, not an approach, a tool, where I would be able to help speech therapists learn how to create an emotionally safe environment where the child can tell the story. B, learn the me first approach. We'll figure out how to do this on ourselves. Us adults, right? We're so good at telling children what to do. Are we doing it for ourselves? And then to actually create a curriculum. So that is what I did. I went back and I labored over this curriculum, which is the SEST. This works as it's called the fundamentals, because going back to our original socially sensitive child, if a child needs more scaffolding and more techniques, then they would have to be added onto this. But this is for a child who finds a social world overwhelming, who has reduced interpersonal skills, someone who is, like they're constantly getting into fights, but they just don't know why. They have no idea how. They constantly feel awkward and uncomfortable in situations, but they can't put their finger on it. So it gives them a tool, an aim, a channel to get the story out and to deal with it. And if you could just go to the next slide, is just the bridge. the interdisciplinary bridge between speech pathology and mental health, like exactly what you noticed in the beginning. And the concept is, and actually the research publication was the interdisciplinary healing power of words, because words have a lot of power. And actually from the research, if you can look at the next slide, is the research suggests that just the process of telling a story is healing. Think about, like the classical vent, right? You want to vent. You had a hard day at work and you're venting. You don't really need someone to solve your vent. That's the whole point of it. But once I vent, I'll be able to do so. So that really is how the storytelling supports the regulation and the connection.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
How do you find that SLPs are like, I'm sure in your area you're seeing this, but do you find that SLPs are like bridging that gap between the mental health and, I mean, this is really fascinating, especially
Yeah,
coming from like a psychology
yeah,
background,
yeah,
but like, are they doing it in private practice? Are they doing
yeah,
it in like the school settings? Where are you seeing
yeah,
it?
yeah. So it's very interesting because I am seeing, like when I go to speak at ASHA, when I go to give a talk, I am seeing this like almost like, like what? Why weren't we always doing this type of like
Ugh,
what?
yeah.
And I am seeing like an excitement, but like all change, it kind of goes slowly. And I am noticing though something interesting is that I'm noticing that the referrals, like how I connect with another therapist, is coming from two avenues. Okay.
Okay.
So many of my clients actually walk in already coming from the mental health domain. Let's say, for example, they have a medical diagnosis or an educational diagnosis, right? So many times they already come, let's say, with an IEP or with a psychological evaluation. And I'm already going to be in touch with a mental health provider. Okay. And many times within the story elements of because, like, for example, because thinking that I did something wrong, I don't want to go to this baking class because people think that I smell, but there's no evidence that they smell. I wanted them to be jealous of me because I have much better stuff, or their thoughts and feelings are very rigid, very like stuck, all or nothing, black, white, or polarized thinking. I have to get an A on this test or else I'm a total loser. I must have the best score on the chess or else no one's going to be my friend. Like, really? So a lot of times then I may like tell them, educate the parents about patterns that I'm seeing, and I might collaborate with their mental health provider, either with a journal or with like a logging of stories and sending over some of the whole stories or any kind of way where we collaborate. But the thing is that with speech therapists, I cannot wait. I do have to give some CEU trainings. I do constantly, but I think that like all fresh and novel things, it takes time. It takes
Mhm.
time. What's interesting is that I do give talks to mental health providers, and they're like, hello, this is so basic. Like when you hear something that connects so fluidly, sometimes it feels very basic. And also something that I like to explain. And I have to say that years back, it must have been like, I was trying to calculate before, like, I think it must have been like 18 years ago or 17 years ago. I was working with a child who had a very significant stutter, and he was seeing a psychologist, and he called me up. This is years back, and just made such an impression on me that the psychologist said, when I'd like to collaborate with you and be in touch, right? And he said, I will be let's say his name, we'll call him Sam, okay? I will be the why Sam stutters, and you will be the when Sam stutters. Like the
Mhm.
psychologist will figure out why, and you will help him when indeed he stutters. So I like to say that in speech therapy, children learn to say the what of their stories, and in mental health, they learn to understand the why and how to process the stories living inside them. So let's say there was a client who all her story, she was constantly getting into difficulties in school and behavioral difficulties. And she had these visions of the police coming together, and it was very, very real. And there was no evidence in reality of any markers or things like that. And the social worker that she went to helped her understand and process those thoughts and those feelings from those stories. So it was a wonderful like display of a bridge between the two of us. But I do want to say that besides for speech therapists, I am getting unbelievable, like almost like breath of relief from parents.
I'm sure.
Because, yeah, parents are like, I can do so much. And again, that was my goal. So what happened was that, thank God, my practice really got completely full. And I started training some other speech therapists and trying to and refer people out. But when it came with the parents, what happened was that we started with the research project, got IRB approval, and we started a support group for parents to be able to use the modality of a group therapy to be able to, where parents would share different elements, and we started running that. Then parents kept on asking me, can I have some resources and resources? So over the years of working, and also resources, I feel like if there's a resource, it should be downloadable and it should not be expensive because there's so much information that parents have to digest. They don't have to have any resource has to be easy, small, digestible, and not expensive, very affordable. So I started collecting from all the parent education, all the feedbacks from the parents, what were the areas of difficulty that parents had the most? And I started with the top 3. So the first one, the first thing, and I actually wrote these up and started these little micro books that you can download. I'll show you this resource. But the first little one is called a practice called Second to Check In and Notice, where parents really felt like it was so challenging to be checked in and mindful with their child. Either sometimes it's very emotionally difficult when the child has social and behavioral challenges. It's difficult to check in. And B, just modern life, right? The second challenge that parents were experiencing was listening to connect. Again, it may seem so intuitive, but listening is not hearing. I myself had to learn how to listen. I literally learned the painstaking way how to actually listen. So parents learn how to listen to comprehend. Again, I could say something as simple as we're serving pizza tonight. Okay, I don't know why as a mom, I'm always giving these supper examples. I'm so boring. Forgive it. But let's say you interpret that like, oh, she's, you know, doesn't care about her dinners. Like that's a story that she comprehended, but that's not what I said. I literally just said that we're having this pizza tonight. Children sometimes say something and a parent like makes up a story about that simply because they didn't comprehend. The second thing is listening for feelings. So many times children don't like to be, kind of, oh, you sound sad, or like they don't like sometimes the feeling word, but the muscle of feeling what the other person feels so we can have empathy for them. That listening for feelings was challenging for parents. That's the second tool. And the third one is flexibility, something called story centering. So many children who think in rigid ways, their parents are always like, they need to be more flexible, they need to be more flexible, they need to be more flexible. But as the parent starts doing the work, the parent realizes, hey, I struggle with flexibility. I'm not flexible. So we actually do the story centered on parents. So these 3 tools are for parents. And I feel like, I feel very blessed. Like last year when I got the New York State Award, I feel very blessed that like, yes, this is novel, this is refreshing. But I do kind of share the sentiment with you that like, yeah, it takes time for people to be like, hey, this is new, this is novel, this makes sense, and this is digestible. I think that a lot of the approach is digestible. That's something that I work very, very diligently to create. So, yeah, I hope I answered that question.
Well, it's exciting. It kind of reminds me, it's different, but it's like you're hearing more about nonviolent communication and trauma informed therapy. And I feel like this realm is growing a little bit more in our field and it's exciting.
Yes. And I think that also, again, it's more than just the realm. I think it's strength based and it's inclusion focused. It's like, what's going on for you? Let me have the dignity, the gift to hear your whole story so that I could better understand you. Yeah, it's like, let me hear what the story is, whether you just said trauma, whatever it is, I understand and I recognize that it's a gift for you to share your story with me.
Yeah, I love that perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk about how it's used as an interdisciplinary model across speech therapy and mental health a little bit more, if you want to touch on that,
Sure.
because you kind of just talked about
Sure.
it.
Sure. 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 Sure.
And what does that simple conversation with a child look like?
Okay. So with a child is many times, I want to give the reality is many times children are already seeing a mental health provider because I have a private practice where the children are typically referred to me. They, they come already either from a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a developmental pediatrician. Like I mentioned, they already come. So in that realm, it's more like we work as an interdisciplinary where the parents set up a meeting between myself and the mental health provider, and we establish goals and make times to connect, and the child's aware that if there's something that I can help them with saying their story, and then let's say why that's the story, I'll say, let's discuss, maybe you want to discuss that with, let's make her name be, Jacqueline, if Jacqueline is the therapist. Okay. So that's kind of like one way. When a child has to be referred, okay, so what happens is that sometimes we want to kind of see, let's say, if a child, let's say, has anxiety and a lot of their stories, let's say, are not just typical anxiety, but kind of really very big and it's pervasive. It's like everything that it is, it's like they're just afraid they're going to mess up. They can't talk because they can't say get everything right. Or like they're going to talk and someone's going to laugh at them. Or they're going to invite someone to ask them if they can eat lunch with them, and then the girl's going to laugh. And the stories go on and on and on and on and on. So many times that's something where I would teach the parents like kind of what to look out for. What are the indicators to know of when a referral is made? And I believe that this is where the referral is made. And if it's an older child who's, let's say, bringing that up to me, I'll say to them, it sounds like you keep on getting stuck on that thought or that fear. And what's that like for you? And I listen. A lot of what I'm doing is I'm listening. I'm not right away hearing and referring. I'm listening. I'm listening for the pervasiveness. I'm listening for ways when I say, it looks like we can benefit from talking to a therapist about this, mental health therapist.
That makes sense. It's helpful to hear how you're collaborating with them.
Yeah. I do want to tell you something very interesting is that a mental health provider that I was working with, very interesting, because I referred one client and then he had called me and said he's working with a client who has a very difficult time verbalizing what's on his mind. Like he knows he has the words, but he doesn't have the words to express his thoughts and emotions surrounding the problem. And he thought that the client would do well learning the essential story elements, learning how to say somebody wanted, because what was the reason, but all the whole story parts. And we collaborated in that way. And the Gary Dick, who collaborated for the mental health side for the interdisciplinary healing power of words in the research article, he had said there was a family with tremendous conflict and it would become very, very heated. So he was using the framework to be able to give words to structure their message. Like sometimes we get so heated up, we forget which words it is that we want to try to say, what you wanted, what you thought, what you felt, what you wanted as a result. So there's really many, many, many different ways as collaboration really comes very organic to the individual and to the condition.
I love that example because I was kind of thinking like, our mental health providers that I think we're stepping on their toes, but you just literally gave the perfect example
Yeah.
of where a referral would come in because
Yes.
they can only do so much. And if the child is having trouble articulating like what their story is, that's where we could be
Right.
very helpful. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. It's really important to keep the scope of practice super clear. And I like to always, even like when parents begin, I like to talk to them about the ASHA scope of practice and where the mental health comes in, what's in our domain, what's not in our domain. Knowledge is always power. And like this, there's no surprise. So like this, parents know it's from the beginning is this is what's in my domain and where I could become it as a referral source. And that's established in the first lessons from parent ed.
That's great.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to touch on here before we move on?
I just think I'm so excited for what comes, and I'm always growing and learning, and I excited. I really am.
Well, it is very exciting to learn about. I wish we had all day. I'm going to go back and play this video, or do you think maybe we should share it like as a link? What do you want to
No,
show it
I just
now?
wanted to show some resources. No, it wasn't really a video. I just wanted to show that show
Okay.
some resources. So just some, if you could go back one, just some helpful resources is you can take out your phone to scan. There's 3 different things you can scan. So the first one, far left, is the therapist curriculum, right? That's the SEST fundamentals. That's the therapist curriculum. That's the QR code on the left. The middle one, that's for the parent folks. If you work with parents who are looking to get stronger in their ability to be mindful, to be checked in. If you're looking for parents who need a resource to help them listen to their child, listen for feelings, and listen to comprehend the main message. And if you're looking for a resource for parents who want to increase their own flexibility, that would be the middle QR code. And the last QR code is just for my Instagram, because my style is, and that was just a little video I want to show you, is before my day begins and before I get into the busyness of the day, I like to sit down with a tea and just share something, a little nugget, a little piece of inspiration. So that was just a video you could see for like 3 seconds. I just wanted to show you up there, what I do and what my style is, but you don't need to click on that. And that's basically what I can offer. I do a lot of references. I provided 3 slides of reference.
That's great. This is very helpful for people to look through.
Yeah, yeah. And then please be in touch. So that's to send me an email. That's to my website. You can be in touch with me. My website is wholestoryspeech.com. You can email me, office@wholestoryspeech.com or ruffle@wholestoryspeech.com. And I'm so grateful to you for inviting me on and for your enthusiasm. And I just really enjoyed every part of this podcast and our talk. And I'm excited for the partnership, Anita.
Yeah. Thank you. No, I'm excited too. Every time I have somebody on, I don't necessarily know like where the conversation is going to lead. And
Okay.
I love how novel this is
Thank you.
and how it can really help SLPs kind of pivot if they want to as well. And as a
Yeah.
parent with a 4-year-old and a baby on the way, I'm always looking for ways to better communicate with my child. So
Yeah.
this is great information. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so, so, so much. And I look forward to being in touch.